Hey guys, Tom here again from synthhacker.com. In this video, I'll be showing you how I made this Disclosure and Flume inspired chord synth. So if you caught the last video, you'll know that this is one of the sounds from my new preset pack, Modulate for Serum. I really just wanted to take the time at the start of this video to say a huge thank you for all the support on that so far. If you haven't checked it out yet, you can head to synthhacker.com or click the link in the description below. Tons of great sounds in there. Also worth mentioning is that I've recently combined all of my free resources into one download called Synthhacker Essentials, which you can also find in the description. Since my last tutorial, I've added a bunch of new custom wavetables to the bundle based on analog and vintage digital instruments. If you want to follow along with these same wavetables and MIDI I'm using in my videos, I highly recommend checking that out. But without further ado, let's get into the tutorial. So we're going to open an initialized patch in Serum. The custom wavetable from my free bundle I used was the SHOBXA saw with a slow ramp up LFO to sweep through the wavetable position. This wavetable is based on an Oberheim analog synth, and sweeping through the wavetable helps to emulate how the tone of an analog oscillator changes over time. If you're not too bothered about that, you could just use the default saw wave, and the final result should still sound pretty great. To thicken the sound up and add some width, we're also going to add 7 detuned voices of unison. As I've mentioned in previous videos, I find 7 voices to be the sweet spot for thickening up the sound without the sound picture becoming too messy. To shape the sound, we're going to start by increasing the attack, bringing down the sustain a little, and also just adding some release. To add a bit of texture to the sound, we're also going to bring in the noise oscillator. The sample I settled on for the sound was the high-pass hardware noise 10 from my free bundle, but feel free to use whichever noise you think sounds best. One subtle bit of modulation you might have noticed at the start of the sound is the pitch. Similar to the sound in my future R&B chord tutorial, we're going to set up an envelope with a slow attack, full sustain, and a bit of release. In the modulation matrix, we're going to use this envelope to modulate the global pitch by an octave, making sure to add ST after our value so that Serum knows we're working in semitones. We're also just going to reduce the octave of our oscillator to -1 so that it glides up to our current pitch. So something worth mentioning with pitch modulation is that sometimes you can hear the pitch returning to the bass value when a note is released. One cool trick I found for a cleaner pitch modulation is to boost the midpoint curve of the release to create a temporary hold function. As long as the release stays at 100% for longer than the release of the amplitude, we shouldn't hear the pitch revert back. So for a warm chord sound like this one, we're going to want to roll off some of the high end, at least before we add some automation. We're going to go with the MG low pass 12 dB filter set to exactly 50% with a slight bit of modulation from our amplitude envelope. I find that for chord sounds that have filter cutoff modulation or automation, 12 dB filters generally sound the smoothest, with 24 dB slopes or higher sometimes sounding a little too extreme when modulated. There's no rules here though. To polish up this main layer of our sound, we're going to add a bit of chorus with the default settings, bringing down the mix amount slightly. As you can hear, this really helps to add that disclosure type feel. I know they're really big on using chorus. If you get a chance, I'd actually recommend grabbing yourself a dedicated chorus plugin for these types of sounds. A really great free one to check out might be the Tile Chorus LX, which is actually based on the chorus built into the Juno 60. Finally, just to round out the sound, we're going to add another low pass 12 dB filter, this time in the effects section right at the end of our signal chain, giving us a way to have more control over the frequency content of the whole sound. Another way I gained more control over the low end of the sound was to duplicate the synth and paste the lowest notes of our chords to trigger it. For this bass layer, we're going to add a sub oscillator 2 octaves down, reduce the unison amount to 1, turn off our effects, and bring the filter down slightly. We're also going to add a high pass filter to the main layer to get these to gel together nicely. If you wanted to, you could also mute the root notes in the main layer, but I found that the EQ was enough to separate these, and I actually quite like having the harmonics of the low notes in the main layer. To tame the lowest frequencies and make sure we don't have any issues with headroom, I also just grouped the layers and added a steep high pass filter at around 50 Hz. So now we have both layers ready, it's time for the fun task of adding automation. In our main layer, the parameters I automated were the main filter cutoff frequency, the chorus filter cutoff, the effects filter cutoff, and finally the effects filter mix amount. If you weren't already aware, one thing to be careful of is that even when the cutoff of filters in Serum are fully open, there's still a bit of high-end attenuation. Automating the mix amount towards the end of the sequence really helps to remedy this and lets the high end of the sound really come through. Finally, to get the cool rising effect, I also just added a simple high-pass EQ at the end of the sequence, which could be a cool effect to use in a breakdown, maybe just before a drop. And there we have it. I hope this shows that although using macros for automation can work great and can be quite convenient, putting the extra time in to individually automate parameters can a lot of the time result in a more polished sound and just generally gives you a bit more control. So I hope you found this video useful. I know it's quite a long-winded one, but hopefully you learned a few tricks to use in your own sound design. Thanks in advance to those of you that decide to check out the Solette preset pack over at synthhacker.com. It's by far the best way to support these videos and also just get your hands on some real quality sounds in the process. I'm already working on more tutorials covering some of the sounds in the pack, so be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell to stay up to date with those. Other than that guys, as always, thanks a lot for watching and I'll see you in the next video.